Do you know why your parents chose to come to Jasper Place?
Well, they bought this house on 154th Street, 104th Avenue, almost 105th Avenue. And I don't know why Jasper Place. I suspect it was because there was reasonably cheap accommodation. They bought that house for roughly $2,500. That was probably a lot cheaper than many houses in the city of Edmonton.
And was that house completed, or was it?
Yeah.
What can you describe? Maybe the house and the loft. And
Okay. Well, the house had been built in '47, so it was a couple of years old. It was small. I'm guessing 700 square feet. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen, and there was a kitchen table where we ate our meals, and that was it. The basement was a bit of a dugout, and that's where we had our water barrels. Well, once a week, they would come along and fill these, I think it was 2, maybe 3 45-gallon barrels, and we had a pump. So we'd pump the water from these barrels for our consumption. No bathroom. It was an outdoor toilet. For bathing, we had a tin tub. That was it. We did have electricity. No phone. We didn't get phones until mid-'50s. And when we got a phone, it was a party line, 3 people on a line. The lot was 50 by 150. We had a small single-stall garage with the driveway from the front. That was it. We had a big garden. The garden was probably 50 feet wide by 60 feet long. And both my parents being raised on the farm, we always had a big garden. We'd eat off that for the rest of the year. My mom would can, and later we got a deep freeze, and she'd freeze vegetables. We'd go blueberry picking every fall. We'd come home with 3 or 4 wash tubs full of blueberries, and she would freeze those, can them in the early days, and then freeze after we got a freezer. My dad, every fall, would get 100 pounds of sugar and 100 pounds of flour, and that was to last us for the year.
And so you had a big garden. Did you have any trees on the lot?
No. Actually, that's not true. There were a couple, 3 white poplars along the front edge of the property.
Mm-hmm. And any hedges?
No hedges. Mm-hmm. No. And the road in front was a dirt road. We got a rainstorm, it was barely passable. In fact, my dad used to tell a story about when they bought the house and before they took possession, he went out to have a look. Now, my dad drove an old Model A Ford. And he said, I couldn't find the place. And so I ended up somewhere south and west of this house that I'd bought. And I got to the place by driving over a beaver dam. Now, that beaver dam would have been on about 155th Street and 102nd Avenue. There's a bit of a ravine there, which is the end of the MacKinnon Ravine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, look for photos, try to find, maybe if we can.
Yeah.
But I know that there were massive ditches in Jasper Place, weren't there?
There were. Now, I can vaguely remember when those ditches were dug. Before that, we didn't have those ditches. But somewhere in the early to mid-50s, they did dig these massive ditches, and they were, to a little kid, they seemed extremely deep. I suspect they were 3.5, 4 feet deep. But they were probably 10, 12, 15 feet wide on each side of the road. And their driveways, of course, with over top of them with culverts under the driveways. They were massive things.
And what was the runoff like in the spring? What was you talked about the street being very muddy and definitely gravel and paved. What were the conditions in the spring with the runoff?
Sometimes the streets were virtually impassable. We'd have huge ruts down the street in front of our house. In fact, one of the neighbor kids and I, we were probably 8 years old, went out one spring and we were lying in these ruts, and the cars would come along and they'd see us and they'd have to stop, and driver would get out and he'd be really mad and we'd just take off. Our parents found out, they were not very happy.